Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Beyond the Case, which is a podcast where global leaders from the Harvard Business School's OPM community join in a personal capacity and they share the real decisions, failures, and mental models that go behind building enduring companies. My guest today is Michael Parker. He was in OPM Unit 1 with me. Michael, it's great to have you here.
So a big pleasure, a big honor to be on your podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you. And I've seen some of the other episodes, so hope I can live up to the hype. I think they've been really good so far. So I'll try my best to at least measure up to your other previous guests.
Mike, do you want to introduce yourself for everyone? Tell us what you do.
Yeah, happy to. So my name is Michael Parker, and I'm the CEO of Illumen and founder of Illumen. We're a company based in Washington, D.C., founded in 2016. And I guess the core of the business is we're essentially a government contractor. Our goal, or our company's goal and vision, is to help the government modernize its systems and services. Over the past few years, it's been more and more helping to build out infrastructure for AI and automation. But historically, it's been really trying to take a lot of the legacy systems that the government has and try to make them run better. I started kind of in this space a long time ago, and it was always a passion of mine to try to make government work better. It's something I was really interested in from a young age. I was very politically active. And when I was kind of coming up out of university, the United States government had just launched Obamacare, which was the Affordable Care Act, which was the U.S. government's kind of first attempt to make healthcare more affordable broadly. And debatable how successful that was, but they started building these systems to kind of help broaden access to healthcare. And those systems, they built a website called healthcare.gov, which very famously crashed almost immediately. And I was part of the team that helped bring it back to life. I could write a whole book about what happened there and how it went down. A lot of stuff I can't publicly reveal. I'm sure at some point we'll have some beers and I'll tell you the whole story. But it was a really crazy kind of learning under fire. And that's kind of how my company got started a few years later. And now we're a growing company with employees across the United States and doing our best to help make the government work better for everybody. That's our core mission.
So has Illumen been the first company that you've built, or have you had other businesses?
No, I think probably like a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, I've been an entrepreneur since I can remember. Mm-hmm. It's always been a thing within me. I always talk to my friends who are entrepreneurs. I definitely had a chip on my shoulder growing up, and I had a little bit of a hustler mentality. And I was raised by a single mom of Taiwanese origin, and there's a lot of history, I guess, with that. And I just was so afraid of not being enough or being poor that I think entrepreneurship was a place where I felt I could be successful. I started my first company in high school. I kind of wrangled my best friend Nikhil. He was my sort of fixer. I remember noticing in my high school, it was a public high school in a relatively well-off area of where I grew up. And I remember looking at the Lost and Found one day and seeing all these amazing jackets like North Face, and kind of eBay had just gotten started. And I was like, Lost and Found. Why don't I just find these jackets and sell them on eBay? So that was my first company. I had like, 100% margin on these. And I would have Nikhil, he would drive his mom's, station wagon to the back of the high school. We would run in and take all the stuff in Lost and Found, shove them into his mom's car and drive to his parents' house. And his bedroom was kind of off to the side. So we would kind of be able to sneak everything in. And we would like take pictures of everything and sell them on eBay. And that was our first company. And I was always sort of starting little hustles and little businesses from a really young age. It was very natural for me. And I think something I really enjoyed. I didn't think it would be something I could do for my life. I didn't think or understand what it was or what entrepreneur was or what owning a company was. I had no one in my family was really an entrepreneur, other than worked in my uncle's Chinese restaurant. But over time, actually, my mom started a company when I was in college. We wound up working on it together. And that sort of gave me that bug. I was very much unemployable anyway. I still think I'm very unemployable. I would be a giant failure working for a big company. I'd be really bad. I'd be a horrible employee and I'd probably get fired. Probably like a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm just a little wired too oddly and a little bit too random. But this is my third company. Hopefully this one is going to be something I build to last and run for many years. I don't want to start over anymore. I want to build something that lasts. I'm really inspired by our classmates, this generational companies. That's so cool. Meeting people of multi generations. So that's a big goal for myself.
And how did you figure out the moving pieces of starting and building a business in your initial days?
In my initial days, I had two very good gifts. One is I was very naive, and two, I was very stubborn. Had I known how hard it would be, I don't know that I would do it because it's really hard and there's so much you don't know. But because you have no idea how hard it is when you're young and you kind of have confidence for no reason, I just charged into it without really thinking. I definitely burned out really hard on my first company because of that. The amount of stress and the pressure. I ran that company for 7 years, the first company, and that pressure and that stress really took a big toll on my health and my mental health, and I didn't realize it. Over time, after doing this for a bunch of reps, you start recognizing what is important to worry about and what's not important to worry about. That's my biggest strength, and that's just through sheer dealing with lots of pain. That's purely from suffering and building the reps and the strength to deal with stress. So I think now in my third company, I'm much less stressed and I am much calmer and I have a better sense of when I need to actually worry. And then when I need to worry, I can go full out and fix the problem versus like knowing when something's not actually a problem or like how to adjust things early. Anyone starting a company, there's no way to learn other than doing because whatever company you're making, it's unique to you and whatever you recognize as a problem. And that problem only exists here and now today. And only you have the capacity to fix it. There's no way for you to learn how to solve it. It's like you just have to learn and you're going to learn by failing a lot and suffering a lot. And your ability to deal with pain is really will be a function of how successful you're going to be able to be. My favorite quote is there are no silver bullets. There's only lead bullets. You just gotta shoot those bullets until the walls come down. So many lessons. The first lesson is for me is my first company led to a lot of personal suffering, and I didn't pay attention to that. I didn't think that that was important. I thought whatever I had to do, I was like sort of my job to carry this torch and carry the wood and push this company forward. My first time, I didn't have a sense of delegation or a sense of team building or even a sense of humility. There's things I didn't know, and also the ability to communicate what I was going through and what I needed. I like really lacked that ability to express the things that I was, I lacked the probably emotional intelligence and the humility to admit I didn't know something, which led me to suffer a lot and do things I wasn't good at. That was a painful lesson. And like energy conservation is so important, and looking after your energy and taking care of yourself and sleeping and eating like these really super basic things like eat, sleep, drink water, like go to the gym, like these basic self-care things which allow you to go on a very long marathon because you don't realize how long it is and how long it takes to solve a problem that's really hard to solve. So that's a big one for me. I think I had a really serious burnout after my first company and didn't realize it. And that's a big one. And you got to take care of yourself.
Were you tempted to quit after the first company, given everything you mentioned that you went through? And if not, what kept you moving ahead to try again?
For me, I did quit that industry I was in for the first company, but I don't know how to do anything else. This is what I am and who I am at my heart and soul. Maybe there'll be some places along the chain of entrepreneurship that like my future self will participate in, but I couldn't do anything else. I kind of realized that I had a really serious burnout. And once that kind of ended out, my natural thing is just to create and think of ideas every day. It's like my wife will tell you, I drive her nuts. It's just like peppering these random thoughts. Like we did our we did like a personality assessment,
Mhm.
and I'm like off the charts random. That was like very important for me to read. Because I was like, I really locked in how true that is. So I think my problem is maybe a bit too much of that, too much randomness, too many ideas. I like, I'm too many chasing shiny things. And too many ways to kill my business, too many ways to like, you know, um, create. I really admire people who can be singularly focused and just execute and crush something and just really nail something down and perfect it. I'm not very good at that. I wish I was. I think I'm a bit too random at times.
What does risk mean to you? And how has that changed as Illumin has grown?
There's lots of different kinds of risk, and you're always competing, you're always combating stagnancy as the number one risk. Because your death, it's like certainty of death. Death is certain, right? I was hospitalized for a long time after my first burnout. And on my way out of this hospital, after going through a really amazing recovery process, I was like checking out of this hospital. And I had some health stuff, but all of it was kind of rooted in actually mental health. And the doctor sat me down and said the most epic thing anyone's ever said to me. And she sat me down and she said, Michael, on the summit of the mountain of life, there is only death. The only thing that belongs to you is your journey. You are here because you are focused on results. And when the results didn't go your way, you got sick. You now are going to leave this hospital. And in order to not come back, you have to start thinking about being journey oriented. Otherwise, you're going to get sick and die. And so I thought that was it. Really, that was such a perfect encapsulation of who I had become and why I was there. And so when I think about risk, I think to me the greatest risk is to be short-term focused and results oriented and to be stagnant, because the only thing guaranteed is change. Look at the world today. This is complete. Every year, it's like starting over. We're completely live in a new world. I mean, we're at a time of unbelievable change. The world is completely shifting. The order that held the world together over the last half century is disintegrating. It is now a new order that will be formed that requires incredible amounts of power, energy, compute. Global supply chains will be reshifted. Political organizations are crumbling. Alliances are falling apart. The only guarantee any of us has as entrepreneurs, or anyone for that matter, is change is going to happen faster than you could ever imagine. So to be able to process that risk, you have to be a special person. And I think you have to think long term. If you zoom out, that change is very manageable and palatable. But over the short term, it's really tough. You will have to chop and change so much and so quickly that you will really drive yourself insane. So it's a very long-winded answer. I hope it answers your question, but that's kind of how I feel about risk.
It absolutely does. And it helps me think of my next question. How do you balance long-term vision with your day-to-day execution?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I think you have to change both. You have to adjust both all the time, because you're wrong, because you need to focus a little bit on execution, or you need to change the direction of your ship. So I think there's no perfect balance. You're going to always be kind of out of balance. Every person is a little bit out of balance at times, right? We're all out of balance. And so, yeah, I try to have a big strategy. I try to communicate that strategy as much as I can all the time. And even so, it probably doesn't always land. And I try to hire people who, like, my philosophy around that is try to hire people who, I call them good eggs. People who have the core ingredients to be great and don't need a lot of care or a lot of adjustment or a lot of coaching. I try to find people who they themselves kind of think for themselves and are kind of creative themselves to solve problems. But, there is no balance, because the world is completely shifting all the time. There is no way to be perfectly balanced between long term and short term. We're always a little bit off. It's like a small blanket on a cold night. Your feet are cold or your nose is cold, but it's hard to be perfect. I think maybe some entrepreneurs are way better than me. That's how I think about it.
How many employees does Illumin have today?
We're about 55. Yeah. All, kind of, I'd say 90% sort of senior engineers, all spread across the country. Really great people. I did an all hands call the other day, and I love working with them. I think when you're like, we mostly build software, right? it's just so amazing what you can do these days with like a team with a lot of leverage, and seeing them build things that you yourself couldn't build is really, really satisfying. And over the next years, hopefully we hire more and, grow as a business. Yeah, I love the people. That's my favorite part of having company is the people. I love that we're small, that I get to know people. I know their families. I know their kids, like when their birthdays are. I love that. It it's really fun for me. I think I would probably struggle. I didn't feel an emotional connection to everybody. I think that's a different level of company, and you have to like learn how to do that and let go and be a different kind of leader. Some of our classmates are do that, and it's awesome to hear them talk and they do it. I still feel there's really strong emotional connection to everybody. So yeah.
What do you think was a strategic? Sorry, let me start again. What was maybe a leadership mistake you made early on, and how has that changed the way that you lead today?
So many.
Mhm.
So many. A few stick out. I think life will always teach you the same lesson over and over until you learn it. So one of the repeating ones in my life, my career was probably not holding people accountable. I think that again, when I was talking in the beginning and earlier about how I took on too much responsibility, I always felt that it would be my fault if they weren't performing, because it must have been something I didn't communicate clearly. I must not have given the right guidance. I must have picked the wrong person. Ultimately, it's my fault. And so this stopped me from delegating well and stopped me from holding people accountable. And I would probably wait too long to give feedback. And then my feedback would be like really heavy handed versus giving like consistent feedback all the time. Instead of having a switch, having a dial on feedback, just like dialing it up and constantly giving feedback um, all the time, because people need to know all the time how they're doing. They need to feel that you are paying attention, and they need to feel that you're connected to them. So that's how I kind of adjusted. Now, I think I was reluctant. I felt like this stress, like, oh God, I need to like chew this person out. Now it's too much. But that's because I had waited too long to give feedback. But if you're constantly giving people feedback or teams feedback and having really clear long-term goals, and then being super transparent how you feel about them, and having this culture of like psychological safety, which we talked about at Harvard, where it's totally safe for everyone to give feedback. If this sucks, just tell them. If looking at it, you're expecting the code base to look a certain way and it doesn't, people can handle it. Trust people to handle the bad news and the feedback, and then you have a real business. I think that's a big one for me. And it's still hard for me. It's still difficult for me. I still have trouble. I still have trouble doing that. So I really have to force myself to, be consistent in my feedback all the time.
Michael, how do you take decisions as a leader in situations where you don't have the full information?
I follow my gut. I really believe in my gut. My gut and my heart are like very, very reliable. My brain is not reliable. My brain is wrong all the time. My brain acts against my gut, and always, whenever that's happening, it's always on the wrong side of the trade. But my heart and my gut like really absorb information really well, and know it's like more about trusting myself in the situation, and not listening to my thoughts. Very often my thoughts and brain are like unreliable, and my brain is an unreliable source of information, to be honest. And you know, that's I'm very intuitive. I'm very intuitive and people oriented. I try to best bring to bear the skills and talent of the people in my teams. I try to have a really good understanding of what they're good at, and through that blend and cocktail of people, I can intuit and feel the direction. And I think being able to connect, because we work with big enterprise, you know sports 500s now, and U.S. government as well. So if I have a good connection of either the partner or the customer, then I can intuit where to go next
Mhm.
much better. But if I'm disconnected from these things, it's very hard. And then I'm using my brain, and we're in trouble. So I try as best as I can to be like emotionally connected to the customers and the people and the technology, and having a really good sense and letting my brain, my heart and my gut like make the right decision.
What made you apply to the Harvard Business School OPM?
A few reasons. My mom actually did OPM,
Cool. What
Yeah,
batch was?
she's 55.
Okay.
And I was like an unofficial member of 55. I got to meet all the people, and they're amazing, really
I
amazing.
didn't know your mom did OPM. Would have been great to have her on the episode today.
I'll refer you. You'll love talking to her. She's amazing.
Okay.
So I was like kind of unofficial. I would like come to classes. I like, it was really great, and met some really, to this day, I met people really inspirational business owners, super inspirational. And some of them are actually friends, like have mutual friends in our class, which was kind of cool. And that's one reason. So I had a sense of like, oh, this program. Why not? Why this one and not another one? That was one reason. And two, I think I've been an entrepreneur since I was a teenager, and I'm 40 now. I never worked in another company. I always started my own companies. Never had colleagues ever in my life. I was always like, you had to make the decisions or had to have a little bit of separation from people. So it's a very lonely life, I think, being an entrepreneur. It's very lonely. No one really understands. Your spouse, I think it takes a special person to be the spouse of an entrepreneur. I really think that they really like, they have to, you know, be on this ride with you, and they have to deal with you and all your craziness. So shout out to all the spouses of the entrepreneurs here. But I think it's a very lonely life, and really only we understand each other.
Hmm.
And the most interesting thing about it to me is that you could find like someone running a $10 billion company, making, I don't know, robots or something. And he could sit down with a guy who had like 4 pizza restaurants, and they would be able to forever on culture, company, you know, they'd be able to talk a language, and they would understand each other in a way that like a very successful, I don't know, like attorney or, doctor or something wouldn't be able to understand. It's like a very special tribe of crazy people who seek to be entrepreneurs, and it connects, you could be from China, India, United States, Russia, Brazil. We all know what it's like, how emotional it is, the difficulty, the insanity of it, the way things shift. And I love that. I love talking business. I love jamming on companies or invest. I love this stuff, jamming on investments. And I think OPM gives me a chance to find more crazy people like me, who can maybe be friends, and it's a lonely road, and you have to walk it yourself. At the end of the day, it's a single player game, and it's a lonely, not for everyone. I think maybe different for family businesses and stuff and some partnerships, but mostly it's like a single player game. And I'm not really a single player person. I'm really a multiplayer person. So having a group of people who I can relate to and who can relate to me, it sounds really great. And so that's my goal, really, is to build some friendships and learn and meet interesting people like yourself and so many others. I'm really lucky with my living group. My living group is amazing. And so yeah, that's yeah. What about you? What pushed you for OPM?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think uh, I always wanted to do OPM. I heard about it through professionals in the industry about 10 years ago. And I feel I was just ready over the last couple of years to take the leap. Yeah, but I think being an engineer myself, I have a dual engineering degree. I've always been surrounded by engineers. I've not really broken into, interacting with business owners so much. And so that's a different level of conversation, when you have everything at stake, when you have skin in the game, you own 50% or more of your business and you're taking decisions. The quality of decisions you take are very different. And so when you're surrounded by individuals who think with that level of responsibility or that same mindset, I think it's a different vibe. That's not something I can get access to through networking events or even through, the friend circle I grew up with, right? And so wanting to get exposure to that. And most importantly, I think it's very, very important to absorb and learn uh,
Mm.
from mistakes or even success stories of others. That's something I really wanted to put myself in a situation for. OPM gave me that access. And I think this podcast is somewhat an evolution of that. I love reading, and somehow I feel this is turning into my interview now. So I'm going to edit this part out. But yeah, I love reading, and the reason I love reading is something which Filippo also mentioned in his episode. Is you get to download someone's entire life's journey within a few pages, and how amazing is that, right? I think back to my grandfather, right? Every time I would sit down with him, and he would tell me, "Hey, son, come what may, do this or do not do this." That's him telling me after having lived that situation a dozen times, and him caring about me and saying, you know here's a life principle I'm handing over to you. It's like a cheat code, right? Keep it in your back pocket and make sure you remember this. Wow. When I was growing up, I might have not recognized the seriousness of the situation or the
Totally.
worthiness of, that particular moment. But as I've grown, I have made some of those mistakes. And then I've thought back to that moment and I've been like, wow, that moment was so powerful. I should have been mature enough to recognize it.
Yeah.
That's what does for me. I feel that's what sitting with people like you does for me. And so I think, long-winded answer, that's been my biggest motivation for OPM.
Something you said like made me think of something that happened to me at OPM. So I think it's so true, those golden nuggets of advice. And it's almost as important who they come from as what the words are. The same words from someone who you didn't feel understood, or whose judgment you would not be sure of it. It has a different weight if somebody who you really respect, who's on the same path or did something that you admire, or and I had a moment at OPM where um I was really worried that we would lose like 70% of our business because we were doing a lot of work with the federal government, and there was like a shutdown and a bunch of stuff was getting canceled, and I was really stressed about it because I really loved what we were doing, and we had took a couple years of investment to get there, and we were building some really cool pieces of software, which I was really excited about. I remember my living group, Ram, I hope it doesn't mind me mentioning it. I kind of mentioned it and I was like, I'm just feeling super down and I don't know if I'm going to make it. And he just looked me at, he was like, Mike, I want to tell you something. You're going to make it. And that is so simple, but it hit me so hard as like this vote of confidence from somebody else who, um, you know, the same entrepreneurial journey or on an entrepreneurial journey as well. It really meant a lot. It really gave me this feeling of kind of calm, hearing it from someone else. And that's something we can also give to other people. I think that's really important when we're in this community of people because, we need that. We need that, support. I think the leader very rarely anyone asks how they're doing or really, everyone's kind of obviously focused on what they have to do. And very few people think for a second of what they're going through or, and that's so important to have that. And what you said kind of reminded me of that. Like something can be so simple, but coming from you or coming from, it can mean a ton.
Yes.
So yeah, I thank Ram for that. That was really, really impactful for me.
When you say Ram, you mean Raminder, right?
Yeah. Super great guy. Amazing.
Talk to me about a book that might have influenced you the most as a founder or a leader. Or you can tell
Ooh,
me about a book you're reading right now.
I'm reading this, The One Thing. I think someone at OPM recommended. I just started, but I haven't really finished it, so I can't tell you about it. There's a couple books that I really liked. I was telling you earlier before, it's so hard for me to read these days, which is really a shame. My brain is completely scrambled and my ability to concentrate is gone, and I need to really work on that. It actually has that muscle. But there's a book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, which was really great for me. As someone who had a lot of anxiety and was trying to control everything in years past, I think that book, he has a really book called The Untethered Soul, which is also really great. They're very like Oprah Winfrey type books, but they really help me and sort of having faith and trusting in God, universe, whatever you want to call it, and surrendering. It gives you so much more capacity to be creative and so much more capacity to execute. You're not focused on controlling something you can't control. Lesson I'm still trying to learn. They're very easy reads. They're great audiobook reads also. I think Michael reads the book. He's a great guy, great author. So I would definitely recommend those.
If you were talking to your 22-year-old self today, someone who's looking to start out, what advice would you give him?
I think it's really hard because I wouldn't have listened anyway. Because I wouldn't have understood the advice because I hadn't gone through the lessons to where those words would have made sense. And so that's the funny thing. Like people ask me that question, and it's like, I think I would just, I think I would just tell them exactly what Ram told me is that you're going to make it. I think I spent so much time afraid of failing, and I put so much pressure on myself because I would catastrophize it all, right? If you don't be a success, your family's gonna live in poverty, your mom won't have a house, you're gonna, all these things. I put all that weight on myself, thinking that if I did that, I would be more successful. If I just punished myself and stressed myself out, that would be motivating and I would work really hard and be successful. And I think to this day, I have a little bit of that mechanism. I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. And I learned that that's not the best fuel for your car. It's rocket fuel, but it's very corrosive. And I think if I would have told my younger self anything, I would have been like, you're gonna make it. Stop beating yourself up. But I don't know that I would have listened because I remember someone telling me that exact thing when I was younger and me thinking like, you're an idiot. You don't want me to be successful. You're lazy. You're a fool. Like what I'm saying is true and I'm going to do. So that's the thing. That's the beautiful tragedy of like youth and our own youth and time is that actually you have to learn it, but there is a journey and maybe it would have been nice to be more journey oriented, but I don't know if I would have listened.
Michael, a book that influenced me a lot about 10 years ago. I got my hands on it during a phase. I was going through a very tough phase professionally. And I think that book made me recognize how I was stressing out for no reason. It's called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. It's All Small Stuff. It's by an author named Richard Carlson. I go back to that book at least once or twice a year. I think I've gifted that book to everyone I know in my family, maybe close friends. I've got the audiobook as well, but that book is everything that you mentioned. It's all small stuff
Yeah.
in the long run.
Yeah. It was like Marcus Aurelius. So he paid a guy to follow him around and tell him every single day that you're going to die one day. You're just a man and you're going to die.
Yeah.
That's a bit too intense, but yeah, like these little things, which the funny thing is, it doesn't go away, right? The weird program we have, or at least I have for myself, is that once I get to this other milestone I've set arbitrarily for myself, then this feeling of anxiety and fear, it'll disappear. And I will live the future, in this stress-free, peaceful bliss. But that never happens. You just find a new thing to worry about because the software in your brain is the worry software that like you've fed that operating system forever. You've given it compute and you've powered it up and it's just looking for things all the time. And so once you've like given it one thing, it's gonna be okay. That's great. What about global warming? Or what about my family, my children? Like it's gonna find this thing. And so I really have to catch myself a lot. It's one of the things I talk to friends of mine who are entrepreneurs all the time. Is just how much time spent worrying fruitlessly. And I think one thing I notice about the people I really admire, like business wise, is that they have a deeper sense of calm. I think they worry a little bit less than I do, and so maybe that's through I'm not sure how self development or whatever. I admire people who can relax a bit and focus on the stuff that really matters.
Michael, what personal routines or habits or practices have helped you stay grounded as a CEO?
I think it's hard to say. I think having people around me who have been through it and have done a really great job is super grounding because it's like a reminder that there's a friend of mine who's probably one of the wealthiest people in the world, who is the most humble, kind, genuine, funny, decent people I've ever met in any social strata you ever can think of. And I always think if he's kind and humble and down to earth, like I have no right to be anything other than that. I think that's very important. Not that like I'm some like superstar or anything, but I think that's really good for humility. I'm very close to my family, also that helps a lot. And I think Taiwanese families is probably like Indian families. You're just roasted so mercilessly, constantly, all the time that like you're gonna be humble. Like you're just constantly in this roasting. The aunties just handle you and mercilessly abuse you until you give up and you're just humble and then you have no choice. I think that's I think that's the good and the bad about Eastern culture is that we're just beaten into submission of humility. Like, it's none of this like, you're the greatest thing ever. You're like, nah, definitely not. So I think that's also very grounding. I think my wife grounds me a lot. She's a German and also roasts me all the time, which is great. And I think I'm still friends with the same people I've been friends with since I was 5, 10, 12 years old. We still talk, we still joke the same way we did when we were teenagers. We still are in touch. Nikhil, I just talked to the guy who stole jackets with me, is still one of my best friends. It's that brotherhood that you can never buy. I know that if anything happened, they would have my back, and if anything happened for them, I would have their back. I think that's also very grounding and stabilizing. And yeah, I'd say that. And I think my team is very grounding because they're all good. You know, they're all good people. All my senior leaders are great, and they kind of grown up with me a bit, and I think that's also keeps me with my feet on the ground. So yeah.
Amazing. Last question, Michael. Once you wake up, what do the first 90 minutes of your day look like?
It depends where I am because now I'm kind of going between Europe and the US for family life. But typically I try my best to start as slowly as possible because I tend to normally like go to 100 miles an hour right away. And over a long period of time, my energy levels drop and I start making bad decisions, or even worse, I get moody. I get this kind of like very cold, calculated kind of energy if I'm like in that operating mode. So I try to like ramp my mornings up kind of slowly, if at all possible. So I try to have a nice slow morning with my wife if possible. That's the best when we're able to be together. That's the really nicest way to start a morning. It's like a lot of laughter, tons of joking, like just the way we. No, if anyone heard us talk in our conversation, we would for sure go to jail because it's just like we have the most ridiculous sense of humor. But that's really nice. I try to start off slow, and then I try to go pretty long in the day. Like if my problem is you gotta like someone has to push me off my laptop, or I will not stop, and it's not healthy. Like I get excited and into things, and all of a sudden like I'm in a rabbit hole, and I just like I need someone to like get me out of it. That's my problem. So like it's very important for me to start slow. And recently I'm training for an Ironman because of one of our classmates, Death.
Mhm.
He convinced me like a lazy man's Ironman, which I'm starting to attempt. So I try to do some endurance stuff in the morning if I can, but sometimes it's hard to do because you know, usually pretty busy in the mornings. So try to do those in the morning if I can. Otherwise, I do them later in the day.
Amazing. Michael, thank you for sharing that. You've been incredible, and I appreciate you being so transparent. I'm pretty sure your takeaways will inspire quite a few people. So I'm glad to have you on the show.
Big pleasure, man. I hope I live up to your other amazing guests. And yeah, it's a big pleasure. This is really cool. I'm really glad you're doing this. It's nice for me too because I get to listen to our other classmates and get to know them too. That's really cool. And it's a big service you're doing for us. So thank you for taking the time to get to know everybody and share their story. I hope you get to do one for yourself too. Maybe switch roles. I mean, that's just as important. And yeah, it's a big pleasure.
Likewise, thank you. I appreciate it, Mike.
All right, man. Big pleasure.
Be
Talk
well.
soon.
Yeah, bye.
Take care. Bye.